Welcome.
Thank you, Carol. Nice to see you, and welcome everybody. I'm actually talking to you from a gas station right by the motorway. I've just finished my family holidays. I'm driving back to Holland to visit my father. This is the only spot I could find. So if you hear some cars or ambulance or things in the background, don't worry. I'm not being run over or being collected by the doctors or anything like that. It's all perfectly under control. Anyway, in my brief presentation, I want to just take a slightly different perspective. I want to focus on well-being and specifically on the implications that AI and all sorts of other recent technologies as well potentially will have on us as teachers, as on our learners, on our communities, how we feel about ourselves. There's a lot of potential, as we've seen in the preceding two presentations, but there's also, of course, a lot of potential challenges ahead of us. In the short amount of time that I have, I've decided I've put together some resources for you that you can have a look at, and I'll give you a link at the end of the presentation where you can follow up on some of these resources, some of which are really the kinds of questionnaires and tools to help you help yourself essentially to figure out what your digital well-being level is like. With that said, here's a few interesting figures that point to what some people have been referring to as a looming well-being crisis. And the first of those is that 27% of teachers have experienced symptoms of depressions in the last 2 or 3 years. 37% have experienced symptoms of generalized anxiety. 53% of teachers are thinking about leaving the profession more now than prior to the pandemic, and 61% of teachers have not had a good conversation with their managers about mental health during the pandemic. And that's sort of the background to this type of conversation around technology, because, well, as we saw in the example that Amani gave us of the manager who fired a whole bunch of people using ChatGPT or something like that, clearly people are very concerned, including teachers, about the impact. Now, I don't want to focus on some of the common concerns that I think we're all familiar with, social issues and security breaches and the role of social media and privacy and all these kinds of things. They're very important, don't get me wrong, but I want to focus here specifically on ethical concerns. And both Raquel and Amani have already alluded to ethical concerns as well. So specifically, what I want to focus on briefly is the implications, the impact that having these types of technologies available to us might have. And let me just get myself out of the way so you can actually see this. So there's this interesting little study that you may have heard about, which is to do with a goldfish. And essentially what the researchers at Microsoft found was that over the years, they noticed that as people started interacting more with technology for their everyday tasks, etc., that people's attention spans just became shorter and shorter, meaning the amount of time that people could focus on one single thing, or even just another person, basically reduced from, somewhere in the 20 seconds to, at some point, 8 or 7 seconds, which essentially is less than the attention span of a goldfish. So there are some really important implications to using technology, even if there are certainly also real benefits, but it raises important questions. On the other hand, I think something that we need to ask ourselves is a particular technology actually making our lives better? Is it enhancing us? Is it improving how we feel? Is it making us better people, or perhaps not? And if the answer is, well, maybe not, or not really, then maybe we should look to either not use it or find different, better ways to use it. My friends Mark Pegram and Aga Palalas have identified a number of digital diseases, if you will, including digital disarray, which just means basically not being able to see the wood for the trees anymore, just being overwhelmed. Another very important one is a digital distraction, which I think all of us will be familiar with. And here's a couple of interesting figures. 3 hours and 15 minutes is now the average daily smartphone use of the average language learner. This was found in Canada. I don't know what it's like in Brazil, but I suspect it will be very, very similar. 50%, this is an interesting one, is the chance that you will pick up your phone a second time within the next 3 minutes. So if you're watching this presentation and you think, oh, I better go and check my messages, see if the chance that you'll pick up your phone again in the next 3 minutes is 50%, which, this is why I tell my students to only use their cell phones in class at certain times. And here's a really, really fascinating one. 10% is the reduction in cognitive capacity just from having your phone on your desk, being able to see your phone while you're doing something else. And the reason why is not entirely clear, but researchers think that it has to do with the fact that as we see the phone, we're expecting that maybe a message will come in and maybe somebody will call us, whatever. We're constantly basically giving part of our brain to the anticipation of being disrupted. And what this leads to is something called continuous partial attention, or trying to follow and deal with everything while in fact failing to focus on anything in particular at all. Another interesting challenge that Aga and Mark identify is called digital disorder, which of course we've known for many, many years, the circulation of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. But of course with tools like ChatGPT, etc., is becoming way more prevalent. And we, as Amani and Raquel have already identified, we really need to help our learners to identify the source of information, the source of news, etc., and become a lot more critical consumers. And the final one they mention is digital disconnection, the inability or unwillingness to engage effectively or constructively with difference. And this is a really important one, because it means that if you have a certain opinion, maybe a political opinion or religious belief, then social media, and including, unfortunately, tools like ChatGPT, etc., are much more likely to present you with more information that conforms with the opinions that you already have. In other words, you are hardly ever being challenged, really being challenged in your opinions and ideas anymore. And that is scary, because it means that as human beings, we basically become more and more small-minded and limited in our ability to understand others' differences, cultures, different opinions, etc. So let me just quickly then move on to something a little bit more positive, because we've seen in the last few years, and I think this is now with large language models, etc., and generative AI becoming even more important, a real call for a new way of thinking about technology, and terms that you will undoubtedly hear more about in the coming months and years is something called design for well-being, design for digital well-being, essentially asking how can we use technology to make us human beings better, better teachers or better doctors or better whatever we may be. And a related term, which is really cool, and I wish I had more time to talk about it, sorry, is the field of positive computing, which is a field dedicated to the design and development of technology that supports well-being and human potential. It's a really cool book. I'll include a link to the presentation as well as the additional resources on the last slide, and you can look up this book, but it's a good one. But I'll give you a very quick example of what positive computing might look like in the real world. This is an example of an AR, augmented reality app that was designed by researchers at the University of Stanford. And it basically tries to help family members and friends of a patient who has an eye disease and who is slowly going blind to understand what it's like from that patient's perspective and how they might see the world. So basically you walk around with your phone, you've got the specific app on it, and you look around the room at other people, and the app sort of mimics what the patient would see in that situation, and also changes it over time to accommodate the deteriorating eye disease. And what this does, among many other things, is that it really, really enhances people's sense of understanding, empathy, kindness, and it really enhances our understanding of the people around us. So technology really can be used in very, very positive ways. Now, I just want to finish in the last couple of minutes with two very helpful resources. One is the Digital Flourishing Wheel. The link is at the bottom. It was produced by the Digital Wellness Institute, and it offers a range of ideas, suggestions, talking prompts to initiate with your learners around all sorts of things relating to technology that are particularly important now in the time of AI. Things around, digital citizenship, the environment, communication, relationships, mental health, etc. And I encourage you to have a look at this, and in particular to ask if maybe you are at risk of perhaps some digital distractions or digital disarray yourself. There's some useful kind of prompts or questions to ask yourself. And if you answer yes to many of these questions, I think I would suggest that it's time to maybe consider how you are using technology and whether it aligns with your values. And then perhaps consider some of these suggestions on the PowerPoint, which I won't talk through right now, but some suggestions as to how you can kind of enhance the way that technology operates in your life. One other quick task, which I think is so simple, so fabulous, and I encourage you to do it, not just yourself, but also with your learners, is to essentially take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, get a piece of paper, not a computer, write down the top 5 things that are most important to you in your life, your top 5 values, and then open up your phone, go to settings, and there will be a heading called Digital Wellbeing or something like it. And it will show you the most often used apps on your phone and how much time you spend on those apps. And then I'd like you to take a few minutes to just reflect and ask yourself, do the apps that I use on my phone, do they actually reflect my top values? Do they reflect who I am or who I want to be in my life? And if you're anything like me or my students or my colleagues, the answer will probably be no. Just to conclude, we've talked about AI, technology in general, really, but in particular AI. It really does have the opportunity to transform our lives for both for good and for ill. And I think it's more likely to be successful in promoting happiness and in our case, good learning, if we link it in some way with the notion of relatedness, which of course comes from self-determination theory. We know that learners learn much more, teachers teach much better, teachers feel much better, people feel much better if they are in an environment where they feel connected to other people, where they feel that they're being cared for, and where they have a chance to care for others themselves. And so the question really is, how can we use technology in such a way that we are starting from ourselves, from our learners, that we're asking questions like, how can we enhance our well-being? Because that, in the end of the day, is what really matters the most. I want to make sure that we have a few minutes for some questions. So I'm going to zip through to the last slide. Maybe one of the organizers could just type this into the chat as well. But if you go to the link on this page, that will take you to my website, innovationinteaching.org. But if you add the / well-being, you'll find a whole bunch of resources, including this PowerPoint, a podcast recording, some of the references that I mentioned, some really cool books on the topic, suggestions, etc. So yeah, I hope that you have a look there. Very welcome to also contact me with further questions at any point, and I'll hand back over to our wonderful moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reinders. As you said in one of your interviews, I was watching. The first thing we have to do as teachers and educators is look after our health. If we don't take care of our well-being, how come our students will do the same? So it's education in many, many levels. So we want to thank all of our speakers and also for the questions you've been sending. They're all going to be answered in the next echoes. So keep sending them, keep sending them. And to wrap up this session, I would like to leave a question here for all our 3 speakers. So feel comfortable to, step in and answer that. We still have a couple of minutes left. My question is, after all this time teaching in survival mode, what do you think will stay? And what do you think has to go in terms of habits and beliefs?
I think that we have understood that everybody is able to learn how to use technology. So before the pandemic, there used to be, somebody's tech savvy, or, oh no, this is not something that I'm going to use. So I believe that we have learned this lesson. Anyone can learn, and we are able to, and we will adjust to the new times and to the other possibilities of teaching.
Thank you,
And I
Raquel.
hope that you're not expecting an answer from me, because just as you were asking your question, a giant wasp landed on my leg. And so if you suddenly saw me doing this in the background, that was because I was afraid for my life. But I have survived. My well-being is intact. Don't worry.
Okay, so this is very much connected to your well-being.
Physical well-being.
I
Thank
guess
you.
that mobile learning possibilities, AI, don't be scared. Just exchange ideas with fellow colleagues, read, and give it a try in your classes.
Thank
Well
you.
said.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Hayo. And Andrea, are you there?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. What an amazing roundtable about a fantastic topic. So necessary, so relevant. Thank you so much, Ameni. Thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Hayo. Thank you, Carol. It was brilliant. So I just need to give you some quick reminders. Remember to check the program for updates. Please, there are sessions that were rescheduled for today. And remember, there is a raffle at the end of our conference. Remember to visit all our sponsors' booths and check in so that you can participate in the raffle in the closing ceremony. Among other presents, we have a raffle of an iPhone 13, so you can't miss it. We'll be back here in the plenary session room at 2 for the last plenary session of the day of our conference with the meetings. And after that, we'll have our closing ceremony at 3 p.m. Thank you so much and enjoy the day with your chosen talks.